Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Today is not going to be a lot of rants. We're going to do a comprehensive review of the front line and what's happening and where Ukraine has benefits and where Ukraine has issues. So we start with the most hot topic, which is that Russians are losing planes at unprecedented rate. Now, we talked a little bit in our streams and so on and speculated that potentially could have been the new F-16 systems that are arriving to the front line. But generally speaking, by this point, and today is the 3rd of March, I believe now the count is about 15 or even 16 planes. I don't know the precise numbers. And the biggest argument that a lot of people are making is, well, there aren't videos for every single one of these planes. Therefore, there is no concrete evidence that Ukraine has shut down so many planes. What we need to, though, kind of go from here is that we never have full access to information. That is the fog of war. And the fog of war here is very, very strong. What, in my perspective, makes me more inclined to believing that this number is more or less true is that what we are seeing in all of the sum up of the situation on the front lines. When we're talking about these airplanes, airframes, majority of these are strike aircraft. And these strike aircraft has been used very extensively by Russia in the last couple of weeks. And they have been used very close to the front line, which Russians did not do before, most notably because they only had dumb bombs that were just way too close to the front line for them to use. So now Russia is mass producing the gliding bombs, and these gliding bombs can fly for about 30 kilometers. So these planes can approach the front line, well, usually a little bit closer than 30 kilometers because they need kind of to drop these bombs just a little bit behind the front line. In any case, these planes have been operating very close and very active in the front lines of Ukraine. With additional to that, we know that Ukrainians have the capabilities to strike these aircraft. There has been plenty of anti-air system that's been delivered to Ukraine. There has been plenty of known instances where Ukrainians did create ambushes for these aircrafts. I'm not going to go with speculation about F-16 in this discussion for now, but it's also a potential possibility that there is some kind of a new aerial capabilities by Ukraine that it's using. In any case, this also overlaps with the fact that Russians, to be honest, are not really dismissing it that much. Like, there is a lot of discussion within the Russian Telegram channels, propaganda channels, that it is something abnormal, that there is way too many planes going down than expected. And there is not that much contesting about Ukrainian claims. I believe the only kind of claim that is now being spread by the Russian propagandists and shills is that one of the informationals, people that are responsible for the information from the Ukrainian side has posted a video that was supposedly of a plane being shut down, but it turned out later that it wasn't, and now it's just being, regurgitated again and again. That's how Russian propaganda works. They just take something and then just repeat it like in 17 different ways. And what we also know is that Russian pilots are now reporting that they don't want to fly. And beyond that, we are hearing that A-50, the AWACS kind of, the spy plane with a big radar on top, they have not been seen flying since Ukraine shut down the second one around the area of Krasnodar over here. So since then, they have not been approaching the Ukrainian front lines. Moreover, the number of sorties that Russian pilots are doing is also decreasing, just the number of bombs that they're dropping. Additionally, in the last couple of days, there has been little to no activity of Russian planes in the Luhansk region. So there only have been like the focus around this area in the south only. All of this is overlapping very, very much with itself, and it suggests that maybe if you don't want to believe these numbers, okay, fair enough, like not everything is confirmed, sure enough. But the trend that Ukrainians are shutting down Russian planes at a staggering increased capacity is definitely true. That one, denying that is pretty silly. That is the airframe war, and that's super good, because if Ukraine will get rid of the planes or make the skies not really pleasant for Russians to be in. It creates a solid background for Ukrainians with the F-16s to come out and take the skies for themselves, the same way that they did with the sea. Then we're going on to the land warfare. Now, in the last couple of weeks, Russians have been spreading false information that they have cleared the bridgehead around Krinky many, many times. I believe it was like 3 or even 4 times they've reported it. There was even like videos of them supposedly coming in with the flag, with only Ukrainians releasing a video how they are destroying this group that rushed in with the flag. They even had like this moment when the Russians are taking pictures with the flag, and then they kind of run away, like dropping the flag and just trying to run away, and then Ukrainian FPV drone just chasing them down. It was kind of hilarious, like when you follow the situation and watching this day by day. But the point still stands. All of the Russian attempts in the area to assault this position were not successful. And the major difference of Russian trying to go on offensive in this area compared to what Russians are doing in the area around Avdiivka is this big name here, Donetsk. Donetsk is a huge city for Russians, which is understandable for itself, but it's also a huge logistics hub. So basically, when Russians are attacking Avdiivka, which is located right over here, this right here is like a massive logistical hub that just supplies you with everything that you need at a short notice. So for Russia to attack Avdiivka is one of the most favorable positions logistics-wise. And Krinky, the situation is complete opposite. If Russians want to have any kind of assault groups trying to assault Krinky over here, not only there are very few roads that can lead to that, the logistics points in the nearby area are all being targeted by the Ukrainian artillery, so the shoulder for logistics is very, very long. Therefore, all of these attacks, when they're trying to assault, even despite the fact that Ukrainians have very, very, very small garrison in over here, it is still increasingly hard for Russians, and they are still sustaining incredible casualties here while doing this, mostly because of the way that Russians' information is still traveling, and Russians are still requesting that taking over of the Krinky area will happen because of their broken telephones, so to say. The area of Robotyne. Now, in area of Robotyne, there has been people that have been spreading panic, saying, oh my God, Robotyne is now under attack. There has been rumors, not rumors, like the first couple of videos of Russians entering the south side of Robotyne, right around here. There were a couple of instances of Russian APCs just kind of driving fast towards the village, dismounting the troops near the house, and then riding back to get the next group of Russians. Well, what they didn't show is the second part of that video, where Russian troops in that house just being obliterated by the Ukrainian artillery and Ukrainian drone pilots. All in all, the situation in Robotyne remains very, very difficult. Russians are trying to push from all directions, but the point is that as soon as they reach some kind of fortified positions where they try to entrench themselves, they are being destroyed very efficiently by the Ukrainian forces. And again, we're talking about logistics. While Russia has like areas around Tokmak and other kind of positions here, it is still not as a solid position for their logistical power. And Ukrainians do have certain fortifications that both been built by the Russians here and fortified by the Ukrainians. So Robotyne so far is a position that is being held. There is no major risk, but the situation on the front lines in general is still difficult. Russians were interested in trying how they feel about taking Vuhledar once again. So if you remember during last winter, not even this winter that just passed, but the winter before, Russians used these trench lines. By the way, crazy that a year passed and Russians are still trying to attack the same places that they tried to attack like a year before, and now getting obliterated exactly at the same places. And that's what we saw. Russians tried to do this probably because it was happened right after Avdiivka kind of fell, and there was a little bit of an uptick, maybe like some motivationals, like, oh yeah, we're going forward, yeah, crush those Ukrainians. And then as soon as they try to go on offensive, they realize that, oh no, maybe not. And then they get bitch slapped. Specifically, this is what is happening in the areas around Novomikhailivka, where the situation is difficult. around Pobieda and so on. This is where Ukrainians have been publishing videos of Ukrainian drones just striking assault groups, and like Russian bodies are just being piled up one on top of the other. It's crazy footage. But if we look at the numbers of losses that Russia has been sustaining, again, you might not look at the precise numbers here because some people are disputing how they're being counted. It's far enough. What we need to understand here is the trends. And the trends are that this January, February is the months where Russia has been sustaining the highest losses per month, I believe these are per day daily averages. So one of the highest, no, sorry, not one of the highest, the highest losses per this warfare that have been reported. So all in all, it's an extremely troublesome situation for Russia to be in. In the last 4 months, the number of losses that they have been sustaining has been unprecedented, and it's continuing to be so. So as much as Russia right now is playing for the media and abusing the fact that Ukraine is not getting enough supplies from the Western allies, they are paying very, very dearly for this. Situation around Chasiv Yar also is becoming quite difficult. Chasiv Yar is a main fortified positions of Ukrainians in the area. And kind of the access to that Chasiv Yar is defended by two villages, which is Bogdanivka and Ivanivske. And both places are reporting that the situation is quite difficult. So we might shortly see of Russians reaching the area closer to Chasiv Yar. But again, I would say that Russia will not try to assault the city right away, but we never know with Russians. Most likely what they will do is they will try to close down this pocket right over here around Avdiivka and Klishchiivka. So we might see Russians attacking towards south once they kind of lock Ukrainian forces inside of Chasiv Yar. And again, this is all dependent on the number of resources available. While Russia is being supported by the dictatorial regimes in Iran and North Korea, Western leaders are still dragging their feet on supplying everything that Ukraine needs. There are also heavy fighting on the other parts of the front line, but it's nothing that needs to be separately reporting. Just please be aware that if the heavy fighting is happening in one area, it doesn't mean that there is a light fighting and it's something easier for Ukrainians on the other part of the front line. It costs very dearly to have these lines set in stable positions. So we should be aware of that. But one of the major kind of topics that I want to talk about with you is the cries from the pro-Ukrainian supporting sides that supposedly Ukrainians have not been doing anything to prepare for Russian offensive and no fortifications been built. And it's maddening to me, right? Because I personally am in close contacts with a lot of the people on the front lines, and they are saying the situation is difficult and so on, but they're also trying to describe the situation in general for me. So in this picture over here, to kind of set it up here, yellow dots is the fortifications that can be seen from the satellite. If you remember when these same kind of satellite mapping of fortifications were doing, the biggest fortifications were actually not the ones that were seen on the satellite. It was the ones that were not seen on the satellites because there were either underground fortifications or they were using natural fortifications of like rivers or maybe buildings to build like underground bunkers and so on and so on and so on. So the fact that there are fortifications that we can see from the satellite just needs to tell us that the work has been done. And when we're talking about, yes, but Russians were still able to take Avdiivka, that is because Avdiivka was not supposed to fall. Avdiivka could have held Russians for a very, 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 very long time now. The only reason that the Avdiivka fell is the fact that there is a problem with the supplies right now. And that is something that we need to repeat every time. If Ukraine gets supplies, Ukraine will be able to hold and Russians will not take anything anymore. And if not, then Ukraine will try to fight Russians to exhaustion as much as they can, but it's not guaranteed that they will be able to hold the onslaught, and most probably they will be falling back slowly but surely. But going from the what we started talking about, and that's maddening, that all of the people were like shitting on like Zelensky, on the Ukraine general staff, as like, oh, you do know fortifications, you do know this, you do know that. And majority of that is based by anecdotal evidence. Guys, I always underline this, that we always need to take reports from the frontline fighters with a big grain of salt. Not because it's unwise to trust the Ukrainian heroes, not because that we should not trust the information they're providing. It is because for people on the ground, the situation is hell. For them, living on the positions in front is absolutely intolerable. The friends that you drink tea with yesterday, today might get shot. It's nightmare. So for them, it's never enough. The situation is never controlled. There is always needs to be a certain filter. So when are people saying, oh, I get reports from my friends on the front lines and they're saying the situation is uncontrollable, there's no defenses, no one is in charge, every commander is incompetent, well, then why Ukraine hasn't fallen yet? Right? So we need to add a little bit of a grain of salt. Like, is the situation difficult? Yes. Is it the way that anyone would want to fight? Probably not. But we need to understand that Ukrainians are trying to fight for their lives and they're trying to do it as much as they can. That doesn't mean that there is no problems with the command. That doesn't mean there is not a possibility to have a better defense networks. But it also doesn't mean that there is no defenses or that Ukrainians are not prepared or Ukrainians don't know what they're doing. Right? So here we have I believe the name of the person is Clement Mullen, did a little bit of an awesome analysis of what actually Ukrainians are preparing. He outlined this major kind of fortifications that Ukrainians would probably use, and that would be the first line of defense. If we switch to our deep state map, we see that when we move towards Avdiivka direction, then this is actually the line around the area of Orlivka. So if you can see here, there is some water bodies that are located. So most probably Ukrainians will use water bodies and creeks and so on to build a fortified position along this this line of defense. So the fact that Russians were able to advance from Avdiivka towards these positions is relatively understandable. While Ukrainians were fighting and falling back, Russians were advancing. So now, if this is indeed going to be Ukrainian defense line, this is where Russians are going to start having trouble reaching out. So if we want to evaluate whether or not Ukrainian front line is collapsing and everything is wrong, right now Russians are reaching this line. So what we need to be on the lookout for is how fast Russians can breach this line. If this will happen within a week or two, then we can start saying, okay, there is significant troubles with Ukrainian defenses and Ukraine needs to make sure that they prepare something better for their second line of defense. But if Russians just get stuck here for over 2 weeks, for over a month, that means that all of the people that were crying wolf were talking out of their ass. So this is what we need to be aware of, and this is the first line. And what is explained also in this thread, and I'm going to link it if you want to read it for yourself, is that these lines for fortifications, there's plenty of them going forward, already prepared, and Ukraine is digging even more. What more importantly is, it's a part of a whole network of fortifications that Ukraine has prepared all the way up to Pokrovsk. And Pokrovsk, to put you in perspective, right? If Russia was taking Avdiivka, and if we take our ruler and say, okay, Russia started somewhere here and they attacked here, it was 13 kilometers. So Russian 13 kilometers. Now, if we kind of zoom out and look at what's happening and then find Pokrovsk and say, okay, Russia is now here. So if we go all the way up to Pokrovsk, well, that's over 30 kilometers. That's still like 3 times what Russia achieved just now. And remember, they took 5 months to take Avdiivka. So it's going to be like 5 by 3, additional 15 months at least. And I mean, again, without even judging that Russia will definitely going to run out of forces and so on. But the point is, Ukrainians have been making fortifications. Ukrainians have been making preparations. And actually, so what is this guy is actually stating at the end? He's actually saying that a lot of effort that Ukraine has been doing was actually building the fortifications around the south side of Ukraine. So in the area around Zaporizhia, he said that compared to what Ukraine has built in the area to Avdiivka to Pokrovsk, the fortifications in these areas over here have been significantly more stable. So Ukrainians were preparing to defend the southern line a lot more. Most thing I'm thinking this is that the resources for building the fortifications of Ukraine were allocated is to support the southern positions, whereas because the eastern positions, something like Avdiivka, was a very secure positions, and the only way that Avdiivka fell again was because of the lack of supplies. The good news is that allies are trying to help Ukraine with what they can. The Czech initiative of supplying Ukraine with 800,000 shells of ammunition purchased outside of EU is getting traction. The first major batch of this ammunition is going to come into Ukraine quite soon. F-16 are on the board to help Ukraine. All in all, don't give up on Ukraine. Things are dire right now, but Ukrainians are not giving up. The allies in Europe are stepping up and not giving up. I still want to believe that in US, my friends will sort things out. They go around the MAGA Republicans trying to kill as many Ukrainians as they can, and that finally those bills of support for Ukraine will be passed. And at that moment, the situation is going to massively shift in Ukrainian favor, because the casualties that Russia is sustaining right now are making a dent for them in the long term. And I am very certain that at some point they will pay for this. It's now for us to just wait and trust in the armed forces of Ukraine. I love you all. Slava Ukraini, guys, and we'll see you next time.